Welcome, everybody, on this Thursday, March 24th. Again, my name is Zach from Screencastify, and I appreciate everybody who has taken time out of their incredibly busy day to join us to chat about how we can unlock personalized learning and student engagement with video editing. All right, without further ado, let's get into the event. Again, the title of today's event is Learn How to Unlock Personalized Learning and Student Engagement with Video Editing. And today, obviously, this is presented by Screencastify in conjunction with EdWeb. And so we're very excited to kind of take a look at how educators can use video editing to really enhance some of the work they have done through video for long-term evergreen views. So before I get too far ahead of myself, though, I want to introduce our amazing panel. But first, let's get this guy out of the way. Again, my name is Zach Blois. I'm the Director of Marketing from Screencastify. You won't hear a lot from me today because we've got some amazing panelists. And I am so excited for them to bring a lot of their experience, their viewpoints, their very helpful tips today, because it's been incredible kind of preparing with them leading up to this conversation. I'm so excited for what everybody will learn from this side of things. So without further ado, again, let's meet our panelists. And so I'm going to go down the line and give them a chance to introduce themselves. First, we're going to start with Heather Esposito, who is a district technology coach at Cherry Hill School District. Heather, take it away.
Thank you, Zach. So excited to be a part of this amazing panel and see where all of your educators are coming from around the globe. I am the district teacher technology coach for the Cherry Hill School District. It's in southern New Jersey, 19 schools. Prior to that, I taught secondary English for 20 years. Also served as a reading specialist. So a lot of the work that I do focuses on enhancing literacy and literacy-based practices, but also amplifying student voice through the purposeful use of technology. So really excited to be a part of this today.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, next up is Renee Dawson. Renee is an educational technology specialist with the Atlanta Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Renee. I'm an educational technology specialist with Atlanta Public Schools. I actually work at just one school, Crawford Long Middle School in South Atlanta. I'm the coach for the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools grant that we have. And I'm really excited to be here. Before I took this role, I was a special education teacher for 15 years. So personalized learning is right in my wheelhouse. And I'm excited to share some tips, tricks, ideas, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. And last but certainly not least, we have Olivia Nelson, who's joining us from Screencastify. Olivia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, I am super excited to be here also and really excited about all of the folks that we have in the virtual room. Like Zach said, I'm Olivia Nelson. I do professional development at Screencastify. Before I came to Screencastify, I was an educator and administrator, mostly in elementary school for a little bit over a decade. And so I feel super duper fortunate that I get to still work with educators and make sure that they have everything they need to use video as a meaningful part of their instruction.
Thank you, Olivia. So before we get started, I want to thank our entire group of panelists again. Thank you so much. I know you all are doing incredible work within the schools, and this is taking time out of your day, so I thank you. And I want to thank everybody, as Olivia mentioned, in the virtual room too. You are doing incredible work too. This is the reason we do this at Screencastify. It is you all and your students. And so we want to thank you. And I just can't thank you enough on that side of things. So with that, let's dive in. In terms of personalized learning, right, especially over the past couple of years, there have been a number of things that have either changed the way we teach and engage students or have adapted or evolved, right? And so when we think about a classroom, I think immediately everybody's mind goes to engagement. And it's this idea of, hey, we want to make sure that students feel involved, they feel like they have agency, they feel like they have a voice. And we, as educators, are able to kind of meet that and help them out, right? So before we even dive into what is the best setting for kind of a personalized learning structure, I want to get everybody's take on what the ideal engaged classroom looks like to you, and what are the benefits of students? What's the why, right? Like engaged classroom in general is a buzzword, right? It's just kind of this thing that everybody sees as an ideal, but there has to be a reason we do it, and ideally it's for the student. So Heather, you get to
Sure.
start
I'm
with this one.
so excited. This is my favorite question. This really underpins all of the work that I do as an educator and a technology coach is to try to maximize engaging experiences with meaningful integration of technology. Last year, as we all can say, was a whirlwind. But on the positive side, teachers were collaborating, communicating, and most importantly, creating at a fast speed. Now, as they have learners in their classroom, in most instances, they want to make engaging opportunities out of all of that content. In the classroom where students are engaged, there is effective use of technology integration because the teachers ask students how it is impacting their learning. They look at data to see that the engaging experiences are resulting in student achievement. It's certainly one where students are learning how they learn best, and that teachers are giving them the opportunity to discover their learning styles and to have choice and voice in how they demonstrate their learning. So whether it's with writing or creating video or maker spaces, what have you, students are in a position to try out different learning experiences and modalities to find out how they learn best. It's also an environment where reciprocally, yes, students and teachers are listening to each other. They're creating an open dialogue to learn from each other. And even more importantly, they're leading together. So students feel that sense of agency, that sense of empowerment, knowing that their teachers are willing to listen to their ideas so that they can have an opportunity for innovation within their classroom.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. The
You're
thing I
welcome.
love most about what you said is obviously there's kind of this student teacher relationship. Even before any of us maybe ever thought about becoming educators, there was always kind of this idea of, yeah, in a classroom, the students and teachers engage. But
Right.
you also covered on the importance of student to student engagement within
Yeah.
the classroom, right? And that's arguably just as important and sometimes more important from an engagement standpoint and really kind of rounding out a holistic learning
Right.
environment. And so
Because
I
because
really
those are the
appreciate that.
skills they need. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Renee, what's
Okay,
your
so
take?
everything Heather said was amazing, and I agree 100%. But I think one of the things I learned during the pandemic was that all technology use isn't necessarily good technology use. So if you look at like some of the ways that we measure technology usage and what it's doing, like the SAMR model, when you have students that are engaged, they're usually doing something along the modification or redefinition lines, where they're creating content, where they're making their own things, where they're not just substituting paper and pencil for technology. So I think when I see an engaged classroom, I usually see a lot of student creation, a lot of digital skills, a lot of just outside the box thinking with the students. I also think that when their learning is more personalized and they have a better grasp of what they're doing because it matches either their learning style or where they are in their learning journey, they're definitely more engaged with that because they're not struggling or they're not bored. So meeting them at their level is super important, especially with some of the learning loss that we've experienced with the pandemic and going forward with that.
Awesome.
I was
Yeah,
just gonna
it's
Oh,
go
sorry,
for it.
Zach. I was just going to add, I think it's really exciting that both of you guys talked about sort of like the emotional engagement. I think a lot of times when we think about engagement, we're thinking about like the time that students are spending on task or how focused they are on something we're asking them to do. And so I think it's so exciting that technology is also a way that we can increase feelings of belonging. We can build community in the classroom. And so I love that piece of engagement that's not just sort of like, are they doing the work?
Yeah. And I think that it also has given them a feeling that there's an authentic audience. Back when I first started teaching, the audience was me. They were writing a paper for me. But now, Renee mentioned they're content creators, they're innovators, they're creating real, authentic replicas of perhaps, creations that will serve them well in the future. But now they have their peers watching it. I have 12 elementary schools, and kids are excited to see that a classroom across town might watch their book trailer videos that they created in their one single classroom. So it's really engaging for students to see that their work has a wider audience, more than just their teacher.
Totally. Olivia, anything you'd add there? Or do you believe Heather and Renee have covered all the bases? I think they were pretty close.
I was going to say, I think all the bases have been covered for sure.
Okay, perfect. So, along those lines, right? Like we talked a lot about engagement, we talked a lot about community, which I love. Renee, you kind of called out like, hey, it can be as simple as not being bored, right? And so, regardless of kind of the level of technology, when we think about personalized learning or we think about kind of understanding someone's ideal learning situation, the modalities that maybe help them learn best, let's talk about the why. Like, why are personalized lessons so important to helping each unique student succeed? We know that it is something people strive for, but Renee, at your school that you work with, why is it truly important?
Wow, that's a big question. So it's truly important because everybody's different, and being a former special education teacher, personalized learning is something that I've done naturally for years, and I've seen the benefits of it for my students, and that go far beyond my classroom, that go with them for life. So I think with personalized learning and meeting the students where they are, you're able to address different learner variability factors. You're able to address learning styles. You're able to tie in that SEL piece. You have student voice and choice, and they feel some ownership and responsibility towards their learning, where it's not just the teacher talking at them, but they actually have to do it to learn it. So there's a lot of different pieces that fit together to make sure that these students are really getting something out of what they're doing all day long. Because if we think about life beyond school, everything's different, and you have to be self-guided in so many things that if we don't teach them how to be self-guided now, they won't know how to do it.
Totally. And we're starting to see more and more through lines of life in the classroom and life outside of the classroom from a technology standpoint, right? And so that's one-to-one devices, it's the use of video. We know these kids are constantly viewing video in different facets, but now we're starting to see that be part of kind of a personalized experience. Olivia, from your kind of work, both in the classroom and obviously being able to help from a professional development standpoint at Screencastify, what have you started to see in terms of why this kind of different modality that video and other technology and other means provides is important for helping unique students succeed?
Definitely. So I will start by saying that as an educator, I was sort of a little bit tech averse at first. I had not used a lot of technology in my classroom as a student because, quite frankly, it didn't exist. And so as a teacher, when we started to implement more and more technology, I at first was a little bit nervous. And I pretty quickly figured out sort of some of what Renee was saying, which is just that the students could really own their learning in a way that took it from sort of that banking method that we talk about in education, where I'm the teacher and I have all of this knowledge and I sort of deposit it into the brain of my students. And all of a sudden, it becomes this sort of interactive, constructive activity where we're building knowledge together. A lot of times, the students are teaching me things as well as me teaching them things. And so, that ownership piece that Renee talked about, I think, is huge when we think about personalizing learning. And, I think it's a step above differentiation, right? Differentiation is sort of the same content in a different way. And when we think about actually personalizing learning, we're adding in sort of the actual interests of the students, right? We're including a little bit more of like sort of the whole child and the wraparound there than we would when we talk about it in terms of differentiation.
Awesome. I love that point about the difference, right? And almost you could argue kind of the graduated step from differentiation to personalized learning. Heather,
Yeah, I love that
how
Olivia
is this
mentioned.
important?
Yeah, I love that Olivia mentioned like when she was in school and the technology didn't exist. And I think back, I started teaching in 2000. I don't think I even had an email then, but you had to get it all right at once. And the teacher was the person who was sort of like positing the information and, assessing and maybe not getting feedback later and learning how to pivot. And we certainly weren't offering as many choices. But now we're in a place where we can create content for our students in terms of video, where students can pause, rewind, fast forward. They couldn't pause or rewind their teacher in the past. We also have, I love how Screencastify tweeted earlier in the week about a universal design for learning, because with personalized learning, I think that the most important is that students have the opportunity to have multiple means of expression. And so when I started using Screencastify way back when, I saw it as a way for students to like practice reading fluency without fear or create presentations in a way, and they didn't have to get up in front of the class, or they could go back and polish it. They could edit it, or that, we could start providing choice boards for students where they could do a pen and paper activity or a video activity or something else. So with the assistance of technology, and as Renee said earlier, like the useful and purposeful use of technology that heightens personalization, that inherent choice, and the fact that education and the way information is both shared, learning is both demonstrated, has so many avenues from which to flow for students. It's just really exciting to see that we can create a sense of equity, create a sense of opportunity so that kids really do become lifelong learners because they've had the opportunity to learn and to show their learning in ways that work best for them.
Totally. And a lot of times, right, when you think about a personalized lesson structure, it's not just the modality or even like the content of the lesson. There's time components, right? There's accessibility components. And so that is also what I think kind of takes things to the next level. And so I'm going to kind of use this as a segue to the next question. But in terms of anything you do as an educator within a lesson, to be able to personalize, there needs to be adaptability, right? And so when you think about video, for example, in people's minds, I know in my mind, especially, certainly before I worked at Screencastify, the idea of updating or changing video content seemed to be a really high barrier, right? And so when you think about that in the context of how it can fit into a student's kind of personalized learning path or even a self-paced learning path, that can seem a little daunting. And so I want to kind of pivot this a little bit. And Olivia, I'll start here with you. From the shoes of an educator, or even from the shoes of kind of a student creator too, what's important within a video editor in the context of being able to ensure that personalized paths are available, different modalities are thought about, etc.?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things. I think for me, the biggest thing here when we're thinking about engagement is the ability to take a video from being sort of static, I would call it, to being dynamic, right? And so obviously, I think certain things that Screencastify has really allow that. I think there are a lot of ways that you can use a video editor, excuse me, to make a video more dynamic. I think particularly doing things like having text pop up on the screen, being able to zoom in and out of things so that students really know where to pay attention, right? I think these are sort of ways that you can make that video instead of just something that students are watching and sort of passively taking in. It becomes a more dynamic piece of learning material that students can actually engage with. when I think about student creation of video, I also think like kids are creating videos all the time. It's the mode that they communicate, right? Like, I mean, kids are on FaceTime with their friends. They don't make regular phone calls anymore. And so they are just so skilled at being able to take video and make it sort of something that is engaging and interactive and that people can share and want to watch. And so when I think about a video editor, I think, the ability to maybe have a question pop up on the screen in text is awesome for students to be able to do as well. And then the last thing I'll say is you mentioned briefly something about like learning. And I think, it's also important. I will be very honest with you guys and say my auditory processing is very poor. If you tell me something out loud without me seeing it written somewhere, I simply will not remember. And so I think when we think about sort of meeting kids where they are and really giving them the material in a way that works for them, that text piece is another one that, again, I think is super awesome, because now all of a sudden the things that I'm saying verbally, my students that need to see it written can also see that. So I think those are some of the things that I would look for in a video editor to be able to make it meaningful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I think
Heather,
also,
how about you?
oh, yeah, thank you, Zach. Also, the ease of use. I do lots of workshops with Screencastify in my district, and everyone's like, I can't believe how easy it is to use. And then I suggest, well, like, let's have your students do it, because I think the process of editing is like a self review, like a self evaluative process that takes not only the communication from the teacher to the next level, where you're thinking about your cues, or you're thinking about where to add maybe some extended time where you're going to embed time for students to think and process. But on the other end, when students perhaps have an opportunity to edit, it's going to help them think about where they want to emphasize something with perhaps including text, or where they might want to zoom in for emphasis. So it's giving them an opportunity to sort of self-evaluate or self-appraise their own work in a way that didn't exist before. I've had a lot of teachers talk about they created really long videos last year, and they would go back and rewatch and realize, wow, like my message wasn't really clear, or I repeated that a few times. So not only is the process of editing helping them fix their videos for future use, but it's also helping them reflect on how they communicate with their students in real time, which is kind of cool. I've had a lot of teachers say, hey, I took this like 15-minute video. I thought about, how my students would use it, and, cut them into like 4 more like digestible bites. Or I've added those title slides in between so that students have that sense of like transition is happening. So things that we do live is now translating into how we use these very easy editing tools to either tailor existing videos or to create new videos so that communication is that much clearer for our students who watch them.
Totally. And I love the kind of what you brought up about the title slides, actually, because one of my favorite use cases we've seen educators use with our editor is to almost create kind of a tabbed table of contents that goes through the duration, so that students both know where they're at in the video, right? And kind of helps them self-pace there, but they also understand the topics that they've been through and the topics that are coming up too, which is also super helpful. Renee, how about you?
Yes.
What are some things your
So,
staff looks for in a video?
I think definitely Heather hit it with ease of use, because we need to do things and use technologies that are user friendly and that are easy to learn, because there's so many different things that we're throwing at teachers right now that the easier it is, the better. I also think that one of the things that when I first started using Screencastify that I really liked was because I didn't have the paid version, I was limited to 5 minutes. So I got really used to cutting down everything I needed to say and just giving the meat of what I actually needed to give my students, or whatever tech tip I was doing for my YouTube channel, just being able to kind of keep it all succinct and to the point. As far as editing, that touches my special ed heart. So the more you can edit and the more features you have, the more accommodations you're hitting and you're able to hit for your students. It goes back to that UDL that y'all were talking about earlier this week on Twitter. So just hitting all the different areas for students to feel included and to feel like they're part of the learning experience. One of the things that we learned recently with using Screencastify and some other video um, technologies that have embedded questions is that some of our students were remediating themselves. They had figured out that they could go back and watch just the section of the video from where the question came from. So those kids that needed to read the question first and then go back and answer could watch that video segment over and over and over until they really understood it. And then nobody knew that they were taking extra time or that they needed to hear it 5 times. They weren't having to raise their hand and ask the teacher to repeat herself 5 times. So it made them very independent and it made them feel like they're part of the class. So that's one of the coolest things I think I've found from video editing is just opening up that world for students. One of the things I love about Screencastify is the editing tools are perfect. Like they have everything you need. And then you can even like hack some of them. So if you don't know, if you need to highlight text with a box on Screencastify, you can use the text box and make an outline on it and just put that over the text that you need to highlight. And it kind of works as like a little draw your eyes to this feature or type this in this box without having to use too many other prompts. So you can kind of like hack it that way. I do that a lot with my students and my faculty. So it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, that made me think of
Awesome.
too, like how you can even if you don't want to share it as a video, if you have like maybe 1 minute of instructions for like a special ed population, it's just kind of going over process or whatever. You can, after you're done editing it, you can download it as an MP3 and then embed that into a slide deck or attach it to a Google Doc so that the student has to remember to go. I don't have to go back and look at that video. Here's that 30 seconds or 1 minute from the video that has been downloaded into a different format and placed within an assignment or wherever it might be. So just like, even when your video is done, being able to download it into multiple formats, share it so quickly and easily to your Google Classroom or your Drive, and even just like seeing the analytics, how many people watched it, am I reaching the audience that I intended? So, that whole user interface has been really, really awesome and helpful.
One more thing that I want to add, sorry. The cross-device usability of Screencastify is huge. So if I'm on my MacBook at work or my PC at work or even a Chromebook that I needed to bring home to watch a webinar on, I can get access to all the videos I have on Screencastify. I can edit what I need to. I can pull out what I need, different pieces of it, or just look at the analytics. So it's super nice that it does kind of merge all the devices together and it works everywhere I need it to work.
Yeah, Renee, I was going to say that about just pulling out the pieces that you need. I think also we as teachers are constantly modifying lesson plans, right, to fit the needs of our kids. And I think that in an editor, having features that allow you to do that for your students is key as well, right? So if I have the same video that I want to show to more than one student, it's really awesome to be able to maybe in one version of it add some text and in the other one I don't, right? Or I might add something in the middle of a video for some students that, like Heather said, need a second to sort of think and process, or I might want them to fill out a graphic organizer, right? Or whatever the case is. But I can sort of make those adjustments with the editor and reuse content. I saw someone said something about evergreen, and I think that that's one of the amazing things about an editing tool that can really help you sort of make these videos evergreen and apply to sort of any kid.
All right. You were psychic and already knew what the next question was going to be. But yes, I love that tee up, Olivia, because the idea, right? Like there's a number of things you can do in terms of editing videos, but you have to remember, especially as we relate this back to kind of the personalized learning outcomes, what are some examples? And Olivia, I'll kind of let you off the hook here because you just gave some great ones. But Renee, I'll kind of start with you. What are some examples of things that you like or that you've seen your staff that you really like do that kind of helps them take one video and update it in different ways to reach different learning styles?
So one of the things that I've seen done, especially with Screencastify, because you can pull the video into editor but it's the original video stays in your library, is that they can really differentiate just with that video. And they can add different types of questions for different styles of learning. They can add additional accommodations, additional text features if they need to. Or once they look at the analytics from the embedded questions, they can go back and just pull out a segment of that video that maybe everybody didn't do so great on, and they need to remediate on it, and the teacher needs to add a little bit more explanation to just that segment. So it's really great that it kind of meets all those needs, and then it also gives like the visual learners and the auditory learners different like ways to absorb all the content and still like get their stuff done. So being able to like hit all the different learning styles and differentiate in one video is just like a teacher's dream come true.
Awesome. How about you, Heather?
I loved this question because it was stretching me, like, to think of all the different learning styles. So obviously, like, listening and visual, but kinesthetic. You would be surprised some of the kinesthetic things you can do with video. So I don't know if she's on here, but one of my friends, she's a fifth grade teacher, and she had created a screencast to kind of demonstrate how to like process writing. And she went through it herself in her video. And then she had her students actually, they sort of partnered up. Some kids were doing like how to make a turkey sandwich, some how to build an airplane. One student was going to be the explainer, giving the steps, and the other student was going to do it. They actually used Screencastify Submit for this so that they could share it, watch their peers' videos, and then they took it to that next step and they went through and with like a fine tooth comb say, this is where I could have improved. This is what I missed or what I could have explained better. So this was like a perfect way of saying, oh my gosh, kinesthetic learning, you're going through a process, it's hands on, but you're using video as that extra layer of support to capture what you did, to go back and rewatch it, and then evaluate your own learning experience. I thought, like, what better way to preview a writing strategy than with video where kids are actually doing it, watching themselves, watching each other, and giving each other feedback before they ever begin the writing process. I thought that was really amazing. Another thing that came out of this is I had a kindergarten teacher. She was recording read alouds for her students with Screencastify. She did it out of a need from last year. And then she started experiencing some read alouds that she found where kids were reading, doing the read aloud. And she noticed that her students were paying more attention listening to other kids. So using Screencastify and Editor, she and I partnered, and her kindergartners all took part in collectively reading a story that they then, helped me edit. Let's take this out. Oh, we have to focus on a page. And they published it for their peers and their parents. So it was just really cool to see, like, experiences that teachers created and how they took that to the next level and gave their students the opportunity to explore within that experience. And then finally, I think for teachers, when I started using Screencastify the most, it really helped me with modeling. We all know that kids of all different age levels have a short attention span when it comes to the teacher modeling something and how quick can you do it. But if you make a screencast modeling a process or just modeling fluent reading, it becomes something that students can watch and rewatch again and again to help them, make their way through a process without fail, without having to ask again, or just to have a model to kind of look up to help raise the bar for them as they're doing their own work.
Heather reminded me of something that I did last year with my students that was super impactful. When I got my fifth graders from last year, none of them could write a sentence. They had a real hard time getting pen to paper and writing a complete sentence. So I decided to kind of flip my writing process and have them record themselves speaking what they wanted to write and talking through their paper or their essay or their paragraph. And then we'd sit together in a writer's workshop and work on getting those pieces on paper and go from there. So I had students that went from not being able to write a complete sentence in August to writing a whole paragraph using this method by May. And it was just so cool. They were so confident, and they really, really, really understood how to use Screencastify, understood how to edit their videos, really understood what they needed to say on their videos to kind of get their point across. So it just was beautiful to see their growth just in all different areas with this. And then to her point with like the modeling, one of the things I used to do when I'd prepare for standardized testing is I would record myself modeling the different problems and the different standards that the kids needed to work on. And I would attach a QR code to that question so that they could scan it and the video of me modeling would pop up. So that they, no matter where they were working on their homework, they had an example right in front of them. So they didn't have to rely on mom or dad or the babysitter or whoever, whatever adults in their life, to help them with the homework because they had me right there on their paper.
And at any time, right?
Mhm.
Olivia, anything to cap it off, or shall we move forward?
No, I think
But
they
I just,
covered it.
I just had a thought when Renee was saying like anytime, anywhere, like, you know, and I'm using universal design for learning, again, to reinforce different strategies and, you know, settings and all that with students and teachers. And the idea that with this technology, with video, for instance, pace, path, place, time, like all of that stuff is flexible. So, you know, if a kid is confused at home, they have access to a video. If a kid is confused in school, but a teacher's working with a small learning group, they know where to access the video. So it just really widens the reach, where students can, you know, advocate or independently find what they need to help them get through successfully with whatever the assignment is.
Totally. And it honestly, for all three of you, so much of your examples kind of, if you boil them down, kind of go back to modeling and scaffolding, right? And these are kind of just core tenets of education in general. Regardless of the media type or the modality that the students are learning or engaging with. And so it's awesome to hear, you know, for example, Renee, in the anecdote you gave about the students kind of learning to write a story or a sentence, excuse me, that is kind of just using video to help build the schema, right? Where it's just maybe a different order than many people maybe think about it when they try to think about the order of operations of learning to write out a sentence, right? Inherently, you're kind of like, well, yeah, you have to put your pen on paper and then you slowly kind of make your way to a sentence that has a noun, a verb, and a predicate. But the idea is much larger than that, right? And it's the idea of like, okay, where does a student feel comfortable to share their voice? And then kind of work on that schema to build towards that objective. And so it's kind of cool how I love that example because it allows you to bring in that ability in and out. But it also, as you kind of gave in your other reference, and Heather, you've referenced a number of other times too, provides kind of through the link that you mentioned that provides the modeling piece, gives students kind of reaffirmation and a place they can go back to. We here at Screencastify, we have this kind of cheesy term, but it's also very true. The video offers students and educators the power of pause and the power of rewind, right? And so when you think about a student in a classroom setting where maybe there's 25 other peers there, the idea of asking a student to go, or excuse me, and asking their teacher to go back and re-explain something has a lot of emotional effect, right? Because there's a number of different ways a student could be perceived for asking that question. But if they simply drag a video backwards or rewind or pause to hear something again, that is in their world and something they're likely more comfortable with. So there's a lot of weight there too, that I just love
Promoting
from
student
kind of
agency.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you really all have. I love the examples you gave because it really just embodies a lot of what I kind of love about where technology and students and education fit best. Renee, you brought this up in the beginning, right? Where there can be too much technology. That's not the goal, right? The goal is connection. The goal is meeting students where they are. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so along those lines, we've kind of talked about different modalities. We've talked about modeling, scaffolding. Obviously, we've talked about editing. But editing is not always in a traditional sense, right? I think when people think of video editing, they're like, yeah, well, you crop it and you shorten it and maybe you accentuate certain things or you blur certain things out. But there's other updates that you can make with kind of a focus on engagement and potentially a focus on checking for understanding. So along those lines, Heather, I'm going to start this one with you.
Sure.
What are some strategies you've seen your staff use around adding things like potentially quizzes to their videos or other check for understanding avenues that increase engagement, but also kind of help them understand some of these student learning outcomes?
Yeah, I think formative assessment is so important. You know, having immediate feedback to see where your students are, to see where some deficits might be, to see where you need to go back and reteach. You can do that on the spot now with adding, whether it's adding 2 interactive questions, 3 interactive questions. It's so important to provide opportunities to check for that surface level learning. Because without the surface level learning, you're not going to get to transfer, which is ultimately where we all want to be. And so whether you are providing a video that they just watched for the first time, and then again, now you're watching it with some questions, you're going to be able to gauge in real time where individual students might be struggling, where the whole class might be struggling, but also you also might realize you're not asking the right question at the right time. So it could also be a matter of the questioning. So I've seen teachers use it for math problems where a teacher is demonstrating a math process, a problem, and checks for understanding. I've seen teachers use it for writing. So like Renee mentioned before, she was talking about like thesis statements. She would model one, go through some terminology, some process, and then ask a question. So, it's not just like a Google form where you have your questions and answers. Students are actively watching, they're actively engaged, and it could be modeling a process, a procedure, what have you. And then you're going to be able to know right away what you need to go back and reinforce, whether it's for the whole class, whether it's for a group of learners, and you don't have to wait a long time to be able to do that.
Totally. How about you, Renee? What are some things you see at your school?
So I'm going to go away from questions on quizzes, okay? Because the features offer you so much more than just asking a question. One of the things we noticed at my school when we started using personalized learning playlists, so giving the students more independent control, is that they wanted to take notes on what they were learning, but they didn't know how. So we started making some videos, some screencastify videos with like hints, like write this sentence down, write this down, make sure you take this on your notes, and scaffolded their note taking responsibilities so they understood how to do it because they were interested in taking their notes. You can also just say, this is important, remember this. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a question that you're asking or even a formative assessment. There's so many different ways that you can engage with that quiz piece to get them focused, to get them thinking about what they're doing, to teach another skill maybe. So it really offers a lot of options in the scaffolding and differentiation side.
Awesome. And I like that kind of using all your resources at your disposal, I should say, to kind of build out some new awesome methods there. How about you, Olivia? What are some things you've seen from the folks you've gotten to work with here?
Yeah, I think Renee is psychic inside my brain. I was gonna say something kind of similar in that I think that obviously interactive questions are phenomenal. I think there are a number of ways that I've seen other teachers and educators use Screencastify specifically to kind of build this engagement factor. So one of the ones that I love is sort of like the Blues Clues, Dora the Explorer style call and response thing where you're asking a kid a question. It's a video, so you're not going to hear their answer, but your hope is that they're going to scream it at whatever screen they're watching it on, right? And be engaged in it that way. I've seen folks blur things out on screen and ask the students a question, and then the blur disappears and sort of reveals what was there so they can build that in, and the students can engage in that way. I think Heather, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but that like building in the work time in the in the middle of a video. With the editor, you can put in what's called a title card. And so you can give a certain amount of time to do something specific. I've seen all kinds of things happen during that sort of allotted time, right? You could say on screen, write down something in your notebook. You could have given a graphic organizer and asked the students to complete it during a particular part of the video. You could have students viewing a video together and during a particular part say, okay, turn to your partner and tell them what you think about this, right? So I think that you can definitely, like Renee said, build in a lot of this sort of engagement stuff with a lot of different ways that aren't just like asking a question. I
Yeah.
will say that I love, love, love the data that you can get from those interactive questions. So I think that, it's just a matter of sort of the experience that you're trying to give the students. And is it that Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, sorry if I'm dating myself, environment, or is it that you want to be able to sort of gather some data that you can then use to
Yeah.
adjust your instruction?
And some of the data can be fun data. Like I've seen a teacher, I was like wowed by this. Instead of like asking questions, kids had to pick like a star. Like, do you give this 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars? Or, how do you feel confidence level? Are you a 1, 2, 3, 4? So it's not necessarily a comprehension or like skill piece, but gaining some insight about how students are feeling or giving them a chance to either like rate and review what they're watching. Thought that was a really cool way to kind of not just ask a question, but to gain some other insights as well.
Awesome. And Olivia and Heather, you kind of beat me to it again, right? Like the natural progression, we talked about how checks for understanding can help build engagement, and you all gave a ton of great examples. And then now you're kind of moving forward, right? Because it's like, okay, what's kind of the next step? And of course, that's helping understanding where students might be succeeding and maybe need some enrichment, or where they might be struggling and need some help. Renee, along those lines, what are some things that you all have done through video where you might have either kind of almost summative assessments that kind of help for checks for comprehension or understanding, or some other methods that potentially help you understand where students are and then how you can help?
So I mentioned before that some of our special education students have figured out that you can rewatch segments to get the question. So where we would see a lot of them struggling on a paper pencil test or on a question that was asked out loud by the teacher is that they're not struggling so much on that anymore because they're able to remediate themselves and take that initiative. Um, and one of the other methods that I really like is one of our formative assessment methods that I work with my teachers on is called Teach the Teacher. And the student gets to find anything about that topic that the teacher didn't teach and make a presentation about it. And a lot of times the students want to make a video because they all want to be content creators, let's face it.
Yeah.
So they make a video, usually on Screencastify, and then they add their own questions in. And watching them kind of think through the process of asking questions that they want to know the answer to is very interesting because they ask questions that I wouldn't necessarily think to ask, or very specific questions that I'm not expecting. So and you definitely have to, give them that freedom, that choice and voice to express themselves, to help them succeed and help them, stop struggling in different areas. So with the video, I mean, you can remediate it down to a student who's struggling, or you can even record something for an extension for a student who needs that, or give them the choice to have some genius time where they're teaching the class something.
Great, great, great examples. How about you, Olivia or Heather? Is there anything you want to add on to kind of some of the pieces that you talked about just before?
Yeah, I was thinking about how a lot of teachers have started to layer in an opportunity for like a Screencastify submit as a way for students to have a different way of sharing their learning. And I think it oftentimes gives teachers some valuable insight to things they might not have gleaned from an interactive assessment or interactive questions or formative assessment. And I think that as far as personalized learning goes, it's giving students like a chance to like breathe sometimes, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to like write this down. I can share with my teacher. And I've seen kids as young as first grade do this. Like they do a read aloud or they do a foundations activity, and then they get to sit down and sometimes with a partner, sometimes by themselves, and they talk through what they just learned, or they ask a question that their teacher can go and like follow up with later. So as far as checking for comprehension through videos we create or videos we have, students work through, I think that opportunity for students to just do a quick video with a question or reflection or a follow up has really given them something different, something refreshing, and something where they feel like a connection with their teacher in a way that might not, have been available previously.
Totally.
I am a data nerd. I'm going to be honest here. And so I'm in the case of the interactive questions, the data is really awesome because you can see all the numbers right there. You can choose how to adjust your teaching and learning based on those numbers. I think for me, one of the really exciting pieces, if you have not played around with Screencastify's interactive questions, try it out so that you can see what I'm talking about, is the way that you can navigate through that data. So you can actually click on a student. You can look at the data aggregate, right, and see everything. But I could say, okay, Renee usually does a lot better on this type of assignment. I want to drill down on this. And I can actually click on Renee and then I can see all of her answers to all of the questions. And then I can say, that's really strange. I was really expecting her to get question 6 right. I wonder what happened here. And I can actually click on question 6 and see how all of my students have done and see if there's a common sort of misconception that distractor answer that students are picking that tripped Renee up, right? And so I just think it's really, really meaningful data, but it's also sort of manipulative data that in a way that I haven't seen other data a lot of places, right? A lot of times we're like, cool, this is the data. Now I, as a teacher, have to sort of move through the tabs and figure out where to find the information. And so I love, love, love that I can sort of drill down in those more specific ways right there with the data screen.
For sure. And there's a lot of kind of data rich information. It's interesting, right? Because when you think about checks for comprehension, at least for me, and when I was in the classroom, I would always kind of start with some type of formative or either summative assessment. But there's some kind of age old tried and true methods too, right? And the one I always go back to is something like an exit slip. And historically, obviously, it was called an exit slip because it was written on a piece of paper. But through tools like Submit that Heather's alluded to quite a bit, or even just kind of creating a video with whatever tools that are accessible with the students, you can now allow them to kind of share their voice through the video and explain it in their own words in an auditory way that then can end up in a Google Drive folder, in a Google Classroom assignment, right? That then you as an educator can check as well. So there's kind of unique ways to kind of do some of the tried and true methods that many of us have done for many years, but through a video format as well. So we're getting pretty close on time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we had one more question, but we're gonna go ahead and jump forward on those because I know we've got a couple questions that I wanted to get to before we wrap up. So the first one is wondering, how do you determine which digital tools work best for students? And so it's a little bit more broader. What data points do you prioritize which of the many tools you use? So obviously we've talked about a number of things primarily related to video, but from a personalized learning standpoint, I could bring in a lot of things. Heather, do you want to take that one first from a cherry hill?
Sure. So when I work with teachers and students, I always am sort of gauging engagement, and alongside engagement, student achievement. Are students achieving where their teachers have set those learning goals? Are they improving on the standards? If it's just fun for fun's sake, it's not going to work. If it's fun and exciting and it's motivating kids to not only achieve at those learning goals and standards, but it's also giving them ways to innovate or be creative outside of class or in other content areas, then it works. One of the biggest things that I sort of espouse is the idea of relevance. And a lot of times we talk about relevant outside of the world, but with Screencastify, I've seen kids or even other platforms say, wait, I can do this in my English class, but I can also do this in my Spanish class. And I found a way to edit videos that I've learned in school or made in school, and now I'm editing my own videos and uploading them to my YouTube channel. So it's taking something that you use to facilitate a skill, cover content, whatever it might be, but the fact that this is a platform or tool that translates, my favorite word, ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And it's exciting and engaging, and it's letting students learn and experience things the way that they have chosen, then it's 2 thumbs up for me. But if it's just fun for fun's sake, no. If it's just providing achievement, but kids are bored to death, no. It's got to be a mix of two. And the only way to find out is to ask them.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're looking for almost force multipliers, right? That kind of both bring engagement, but also bring positive outcomes.
Because ultimately, as a coach, you start off by asking the teacher, like, what is it that you want to improve? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish? But at the same time, you want to accomplish that in a way that is engaging and empowering for students, especially when we're talking about personalizing learning. So, if the platform checks all those boxes, then it's one to keep using.
Awesome. How about you, Renee?
I would say with my teachers, I usually focus on the content first because the technology, you add that for engagement, you add that for work products or whatever you're looking for, but we have to have the content first because you can't just add a bunch of technology and just think they're going to learn. So the content drives what technology I recommend. And then after we kind of hammer out the content, then I usually work with some kind of like backwards design type method where we're looking at what their final product what they want their final product to be, and then how we can engage technology with the content and the student to get to that final product. So that's kind of the way I work with it with my teachers. And it's been very successful so far because there's all sorts of different tech, but if it's not right for the content, then it's not right for the content. And I also um, kind of feel out their technology comfort level because I don't want to give them something that they can't use or they don't feel comfortable and confident using with their students. Because it's when technology fails, it's embarrassing no matter who you are. So I definitely don't want them to be in front of a classroom and have things go totally awful. So I usually try to use something that they're very comfortable with. And if they're not comfortable but still want to use it, then I go in and model or co-teach with them.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. We know there's a few more questions, so we'll actually do our best to answer some of those offline for those who of you have asked. But again, I wanted to make sure that we kind of stay within our time frame here. So a couple of things to kind of close out here. Of course, thank you so much to our panelists, Heather, Olivia, and Renee, for taking time out of your day to join us and share some of these amazing examples. Hopefully everybody got some of those awesome examples too. And then thank you to everybody who joined us for this virtual session, because I know your lives are incredibly busy as an educator. So it means the world to us that you joined us. And again, thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it. And thank you to all of those who maybe listened in the future on the recording. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, depending on where you are in the world. And we will talk soon. Take care.